Are you burned out and wondering if part-time work could be the answer? But then you think about your student loan bill and you freeze and you're actually wondering if you can afford to slow down. Well, I can help answer that question today. We're going to go through a couple different scenarios, a couple thoughts to help you decide if that's something that you could do with your student loans. I'm Megan. I'm a certified student loan professional, a CFP professional. That's a certified financial planning professional. And I talk a lot about student loans and finances. And I'm sick today also, by the way. It's not Christmas in July. My nose is red because I've been blowing it a lot. So forgive my weird voice, forgive my sickiness, but I thought today would be a really fun topic to chat about. And we talk a lot about our higher income professionals like physicians, dentists, physical therapists, vets, CRNAs, a lot of medical professionals, mainly because you guys tend to have a lot of student loan debt, and that is our specialty. Earning great money is awesome, right? But also it could come with carrying a lot of debt because you had to spend a lot of years going to school to get that degree. And so we have student loans. We're trying to figure out, how can we do life and manage our loans? And maybe we may fantasize about part-time work or sabbaticals or just like a little bit more breathing room. You've been in the profession for a little bit and you just want a little breathing room from working. And maybe that means part-time work. So let's talk about what you're actually asking. The deeper question here isn't just, can I afford it? The deeper question is more so, will going part-time tank my financial future? Is it going to mess anything else up, right? Will my loans suffocate me if I work less? That's a lot of times the panic or the scare about going part-time with large student loan balances. So you're probably balancing about $200,000 or more of student loan debt if you're one of our average medical professionals. You may have had some lifestyle creep over the years because you have been in that I deserve it mentality. And rightfully so. You did a lot of work. You did a lot of studying to get where you are. But maybe that's crept into your spending, and you're starting to realize, though, that you are just tired of high stress, high demand, the roles that you have in your job. So there are 5 financial questions you must really answer before we take this leap to thinking about part-time and really to help us analyze it. So number 1 is, what is your actual cash flow? Many people cannot answer this. They don't know how much they spend per month. They can maybe list out a couple bills here and there, like my rent payment or my car payment or whatever, but you really need to know where every dollar is going, net of taxes and insurance and your student loan payments. What's left? What is left? And again, a lot of people don't know this. Check out our video on how to manage cash flow by check out our video on how to manage cash flow, clicking on the link above, and that can help you get some pointers. But overall, cash flow is the lifeblood of a financial plan. It is what can help you make decisions on your life and what you're doing with your finances. If we have the cash flow to be able to cut down hours, or maybe if we're open to making room in our cash flow to do that, then it can be possible. We just need to know, where are we spending right now? The awareness is super key. The second question we have to ask ourselves is, what happens to your student loan strategy if our income drops? Are you someone who's on an income-driven plan? Because if you are, and you're going towards loan forgiveness, then your payment is going to drop if your income drops. The payment stays proportionate to your income over time, which is a good thing. If you are PSLF eligible right now, though, and you're thinking about dropping down to part-time, to be eligible for PSLF, we have to be working at least 30 hours a week to maintain eligibility for that program. So that might be something to consider, where maybe part-time is 32 hours a week at your facility. And that's fine. That's fine for PSLF purposes. It doesn't risk your PSLF, your loan forgiveness path. But if part-time is 28 hours a week on average, you're not going to qualify for PSLF anymore. So we may want to consider a different strategy. It could be the longer-term forgiveness path. That's an option. But we need to know, how does this lower income affect our student loan strategy? And if we're already on an income-driven plan pursuing loan forgiveness to some capacity, the answer is probably it's not going to affect much, because your payment's going to decrease and you're still going to pursue loan forgiveness. But we'll show some examples here in a minute. But if you're someone who your plan is to pay off your student loans, you are on a payback plan, then lower income is going to mean we have less resources to be putting towards that student loan to pay the bill down, right? So that would be something to consider, because that could make that loan payoff journey a little more expensive than you were originally anticipating. Number 3, Do you have emergency financial buffers in place? Emergency savings, sinking funds, a short-term savings bucket. Do we have these things? And you ideally want to have 3 to 6 months of your necessary living expenses. And that's a rule of thumb. This could mean that you cover yourself if you were laid off or you left your job for 3 to 6 months where you're not in a panic to find the next thing. You've got some time. You could still pay your bills and still live a similar standard of living. But that rule of thumb is also helpful if you own a home and 3 things go wrong at once, like your water heater, your air conditioning, and then your refrigerator. You might need some emergency savings on hand to take care of some necessities that just happen in life, right? So emergency savings is crucial to have established before we're thinking about going part-time. Number 4, are we willing to reduce lifestyle costs, or do you expect to maintain them? This is something that you can help yourself identify by doing that cash flow exercise above, learning more about what you spend your money on. Because there could be a lot of things in your cash flow that you're spending money on right now that you don't use anymore or that you don't care too much about anymore. And you can reprioritize those funds to allow for you to live maybe more of a part-time lifestyle. This is where a lot of plans fall apart though. Your budget can't be based on full-time income, but part-time hours, right? So we've got to make sure that we've got room for the lower income and your expenses. And if that works with part-time income, great. If it doesn't, we're going to have to make some sacrifices to make that possible. And that's okay. And the last question you want to ask yourself, number 5, is what are you optimizing for? Is it your time? Is it your health? Is it your family? Your mental health? If your values aren't aligned with your work schedule, then no amount of money is going to fix the issue or the resentment that you have. So we have to get our goals aligned with what we want to do with our money. And that can help us get to a part-time schedule sooner. I like to say it's not about saying no to things. So if you're someone who's going to have to reduce your lifestyle expenses to be able to go from full-time to part-time, it's not about saying no to things. I mean, you're going to have to, right? You might have to reduce eating out or shopping or some of your other discretionary expenses, maybe even cutting out a big expense, like maybe selling your car and getting a cheaper car or moving into a smaller apartment. There might be some of those sacrifices, right? But it's because you're saying yes to something else that's more important to you. It's saying yes to that part-time lifestyle, that work-life balance that you really want. So instead of framing it as I'm making all these sacrifices, I'm saying no to a lot of stuff, think about it more so as I'm saying yes to the lifestyle that I want. So let's talk about an example, maybe a common example we see of a medical professional that has $200,000 of loans. Let's say they've got the average interest rate of 6.8%. They started repayment in 2020, and we are single right now. Let's keep things easy. And let's say we make full-time, let's say we make about 180. So 180,000 is what we're bringing in. Our balance is about 200,000. Let's say we're not working towards public service loan forgiveness. The income-driven repayment options that we have, if we borrowed for the first time after July 2014, then we would have access to this new IBR plan right here. The pay plan we think is going to be going away with the Senate bill that recently came out July 4th, 2025. But if we are a new borrower, we could have access to new IBR, which is essentially the same thing as pay. It's 10% of discretionary income with a 20-year timeline to forgiveness. Old IBR would be the alternative if we're not eligible for new IBR. This is based on 15% of discretionary income, so the payment is a little higher, and it's a 25-year timeline to forgiveness. This WRAP plan is a proposal by the Senate and the House. It's not available for us to apply for right now, but it's a plan based on 10% of discretionary income. It has a slightly different calculation than the new IBR plan, but it does have some interest subsidies that are pretty interesting, but it has a 30-year timeline to forgiveness. This is still a proposal, so take these numbers with a grain of salt. But right now, if I was talking to somebody who was making about $180,000, they're thinking about going part-time, I want to know, okay, what's your current student loan strategy? Since they're not going towards PSLF, they probably are someone who might want to pay the loans off. Or, there's also an argument for just staying on new IBR and going towards the longer term forgiveness. I look at the total cost of loan payback, and I look at the net present value numbers here. So net present value is what does the total cost feel like in today's dollars, since we're talking about different time frames. So the new IBR plan, we'd pay about $291 between now and forgiveness time, so $2040 in this case. we'd have a balance still forgiven at about $73,000. So we don't end up paying fast enough to pay this balance off. We get the $73,000 forgiven, and let's pretend we have to pay taxes on it. That's called the tax bomb, and this is potentially going to be the case if we have a forgiven debt. The IRS sees it as a benefit to you that you got debt forgiven, and they want to tax you on it. Yay! So we have to pay taxes on that. So in our student loan plans, we plan on saving for this over time to prepare, but tax bill of about $29,000. So if I add the payments plus the taxes, that gives us a total cost of $320,000 or a net present value cost of about $220,000. That's not the cheapest, so maybe refinancing could be a better option. Refinancing is privatizing the loans, taking the loans to a private company in hopes of reducing the interest rate. So in this example, I used a 5% interest rate and a 20-year term, and that total cost shakes out to about $316,000. They are very close from a total cost perspective. Net present value is a little different because I used a 20-year term. I could also squish the payments into a 15-year term to kind of line up the timelines a little closer to compare apples to apples. So about $284 would be the total cost there if we're able to stomach the $1,500 a month payments or $1,600 a month payments. $206 is the total cost. But it's also still arguable that this person could do loan forgiveness if they weren't really interested in accelerating their payments. They were okay with those income-driven payments over time, and maybe as income increases, the payments slightly increase, but if they wanted to stay in the Fed system for one reason or another, then that could be an option. So I would kind of leave this up to the client on what we want to do. And if this person is interested in going part-time, that's where staying in the federal system might actually be a really big benefit. So let's say part-time, we're still making good income, but this drops down to maybe like $120,000. So now we've got same situation, same balance, same situation, but lower income. Our student loan payments on the new IBR plan are going to be cheaper. And that makes sense because our income is lower. What's interesting is things pivot a little bit where refinancing used to be like the best, from a total cost perspective, and a net present value perspective. But now we're looking at new IBR and it's looking pretty attractive where we pay about $179 towards the loans. We do get a much larger balance forgiven in the future because our payments are not enough to work down the principal. So the balance grows, but that's okay because whatever balance is left over gets forgiven. Then we pay taxes on that. So the tax bill is a little higher here. But if we prepare for that, we're going to be okay. And if we take the payments plus the taxes, that shakes out to about $269 for our total cost. And for our net present value, that's about $170,000. So all in, this is a good option. It's actually a little cheaper than what it would have looked like if we were full-time. Crazy enough, right? So in this situation, if someone was saying, hey, I really want to go part-time, my student loans are literally the only reason that's holding me back, I'd say, hey, you can go part-time. Do it. If you can afford it cash flow-wise with your other lifestyle expenses, go for it because this income-driven plan could be a good option. We do pivot to the loan forgiveness path, but at the end of the day, it shakes out to be a lower total cost and we don't have to prioritize putting a ton of money towards the loans. We just have to save up and prepare for this tax implication. So we'd want to factor that into our plan as we're factoring in what our other expenses are going to look like. When is going part-time maybe not going to work though? I would say if you're somebody who has a lot of private student loans that don't have access to these income-driven options, there's not really any flexibility there unless you can refinance them again and allow the payment to be lower by extending the term. But that also makes the payback a little more expensive because we're not relying on forgiveness when it comes to private loans at all. We're relying on, a fixed payment that's paying down principal and interest every month. So we might be a little more limited there. Another thing that might make me pause to say, yeah, go for it for part-time is if you're barely covering your current lifestyle expenses now on full-time, there'd have to be some drastic changes to maybe your bigger lifestyle expenses, like your housing, your transportation, things like that to make part-time possible if there's going to be an income drop. Because if you're having a hard time now on full-time income, it's not going to get easier, right? So we've got to figure that out before you take the leap. When going part-time is also not going to probably work is if you're trying to go part-time without adjusting expectations, without knowing that lifestyle changes may have to happen. Remember, we're saying yes to a different goal, a different lifestyle, not saying no necessarily, but we're saying yes to that different lifestyle. And that means we do have to adjust our expectations on what we can afford, what we can be saving, what we can be doing with our money, because resources are a little more limited. And then lastly, when this is probably not a good idea, is when you have not built up enough financial security, like your emergency savings we talked about, and we don't have options for insurance or things to protect ourselves before we take this leap. So that's something that you need to take a look at beforehand. So how can you run the numbers for yourself when it comes to your student loans and your part-time income? Well, a quick framework I would say I use with clients is you want to project what the post-part-time income is going to look like. So what is that part-time income going to shake out to be, net or gross or adjusted gross income, however you want to look at it. But grab that number, and then that's what we can start with. Then we want to adjust the loan payments based on that new income or that loan plan. We need to understand how that student loan plan is going to change within the lower income that we have coming in. Then we want to adjust and take a look at a leaner lifestyle budget. If we don't already have one, you may already have one. But if not, we need to take a look at areas of expenses that we can reduce or cut so we can make room for this lifestyle change. You also want to assess what other financial goals might take a hit. So are you someone who's also wanting to retire early? Well, you're probably not going to be able to save as much potentially if you were to go part-time and income was to decrease and we're having to factor in our lifestyle expenses still. So that might be something to consider is going part-time more long-term, or is it more short-term for a bit? And assess what other financial goals do you have in the mix that are probably going to be impacted, and what does that mean for their timelines and how you feel about that, and what kind of balance can we strike to still accomplish those goals, but within maybe a different time frame or a different perspective with your part-time income. You also want to stress test your budget and just yourself in general for unexpected expenses. Because unexpected things will always happen. That's the beauty of having that emergency savings account. Gives you a lot of peace of mind. If this is something that's on your mind, you don't have to figure it out alone. There are folks out there that can help you with this. At SLP Wealth, we do comprehensive financial planning, and we work with folks exactly like you who have the high income, or at least the high income opportunities. We have the high debt, and we're ready for a different kind of life. Whether that's being more financially independent, whether that's reducing our hours from full-time to part-time, whether that's retiring early, whatever that goal is for you that you're trying to fit and make your lifestyle and make your money make you that lifestyle, right? We can help you. So if you're ready to take the next step, we work with clients on a one-on-one basis to build that life that they love. And whether you're working full-time or part-time or whatever you desire, we can help. So link is down below for more information on how you can work with us. If you like this video, or if you have any other ideas on what you should be doing before you consider part-time, share a comment and share this with somebody who might be thinking about it too. Leave a comment too on what questions you have about going part-time. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll catch you on the next one.